Hello and welcome into another episode of Snakes Territory. I'm Jesse Friedman alongside Jack Sommers. And Jack, it's been a fun few days here with the GM meetings happen. We've had a few different stories being written, some headlines come out. We actually have a decent amount to talk about today. It's always a good time.
Always a good time, and I missed you, Jesse. It's been too long.
Yeah, we apologize for not sticking to the show schedule that we put out earlier in the week. You all can probably still hear it. I am getting over a cold here. My voice is maybe at 80% today, but yesterday it was at like 50%. It would have been a pretty painful listen for all of you. So we did it. We did it really for your benefit more than anything else. But yeah, the GM meetings happened, Jack, here over the past few days. A shout out to our good friend Nick Picoro over at the Arizona Republic, who did some great reporting out there on the Diamondbacks situation. The question that we wanted to start off with here today, Jack, is shown there at the top of the screen. Is Mike Hazen boxed in? Just hearing more about the Diamondbacks situation this offseason, what their goals are. Is it even possible under the budget constraints that this team has to be able to get back into contention next year, to put together a roster that looks like a team that really has a shot at making the playoffs? It's not a super easy question to answer, but I think it's definitely worth considering.
Yeah, well, I mean, essentially, Mike has three potential avenues to improve the roster and specifically, most importantly, improve the pitching staff. That would be via free agency, via trade off the major league roster, or strip mining your minor league system of any and all prospects that are actually uh, would get you somebody that's going to actually help you this year. So, those are the avenues. And when you look at each one individually, one by one, as we're about to do, it really creates quite the dilemma. I mean, I just kind of want to open by saying, look, they're very creative people and they're very intelligent, and this is why they get paid the big bucks. And just because I don't see the pathway forward doesn't mean there isn't one. But, if they manage to get to where they need to be as far as building up this pitching staff without weakening themselves so much in other areas, then they should get executive of the year before the season even starts.
I guess all of this really has to do with the $1 million question of how much money do the Diamondbacks actually have to spend this offseason? We've heard multiple times from people in the front office that we should expect the payroll to be lower than it was a season ago. That gives us some insight, but it doesn't tell us a whole lot. I mean, the Diamondbacks set a franchise record. They were up near $200 million in payroll this past year. As of right now, depending on how you crunch the numbers, it's somewhere in the 140, $145 million range is what they have on the books right now. So, less than $200 million doesn't tell us a whole lot. I mean, is it less than 200 in that they actually don't have any money to spend at all? Or is it less than 200 in that maybe it's about halfway between where they are now and where they were this past season? Maybe it lands somewhere in the 175 range. I think that's kind of what you and I have maybe assumed, that somewhere in the middle is probably the most likely outcome. I know Hazen himself talked about this, Jack, an article that came out. I believe it was just a couple days ago from Nick Picoro, or was this one today? I think I'm looking at the wrong one. An article that came out, I believe that came out today from Nick Picoro, where Mike Hazen addresses some of the payroll questions, and he said this when asked about if the D-backs have any flexibility at all. He said, "I don't really feel that way, honestly." Talking about not feeling like he has zero room to add at all. He continued, "That's not the impression I have. Are we going to be doing what we did last offseason? Probably not. But I don't think I have zero wiggle room or avenues to pursue players." Jack, what do you make of this?
Yeah. Well, look, the numbers are the numbers. I feel a little bit validated. I had 141.6 million, I think, in our last iteration. Nick said it's about 144, so same thing. It's there. And I've been working on the assumption that they probably have at least 25 million to work with, and maybe as much as 40. Right? I mean, when they say they were close to 200, it was really more like 192, 195. Depending on how you want to compare apples to apples and how you want to categorize things. So, I think that if they're only cutting 10 or 15 million off the payroll, then that's not too big a deal. If they're cutting 25, 30 million off the payroll, then it's a big deal.
Yeah.
So that's the first point. Of course, there's a lot of dead money on the payroll due to people that are injured. Corbin Burnes, Lourdes Gurriel Jr., AJ Puck, who's going to get paid in arbitration, Justin Martinez. I mean, these guys are all, eating up over $50 million. I don't know if it's $60 million. It's a big number. And they're not going to be there. So they have to fill all of those slots, at least for half a season, if not more. So I think that, look, when we look at this, it's a very tight box that he's in. Doesn't mean he can't operate within it to improve the team. But the bottom line here is if you can pull up that chart which shows the pitching. So Fangraphs came out with their depth chart projection, and this is based on Steamer projections. And it's WAR projection by batting, by pitching, in total. And I've sorted it by worst to best, just the worst 10 or so teams on the pitching side. And what this shows is pitching WAR. The Rockies are projected for 6.6, the White Sox 8.5, and the Diamondbacks 8.9. Those are the only three teams in single digits, and the Diamondbacks are projected to have the third least productive pitching staff as of today. So that's the platform that they have to build off of. And they need to get that number up to 13, 14. They need to add 5, 6, 7 WAR on paper to that pitching staff just to have a reasonable shot at being an 89, 90 win team and going to the playoffs. That's kind of on paper, right? Might take a few wins less, a few wins more, but that's kind of what they need to do. And so when you look at it that way, yes, they have that terrific core of position players. It's 26.3 WAR projected on paper for position players. 20 of that comes from 4 guys, right? Corbin Carroll, Geraldo Perdomo, Ketel Marte, and Gabriel Moreno. So, 20 of that 26 WAR comes from 4 position players, and it's not spread very evenly, and it's woeful on the pitching side. Those are based on one projection system, Steamer, and then applying their playing time projections. Once they layer in Zips projections and average it out, it might change 5 or 10%, but it's not going to grow by leaps and bounds. That's already the band we're in. If they're at 8.9, that projection isn't going to be more than 10, just by adding Zips. It's probably going to be around the same.
So basically, the Diamondbacks are entering the season with, on paper, the third worst pitching staff in all of baseball. And that's not particularly surprising given what we witnessed this year, what we witnessed the year before that, right? I mean, the Diamondbacks were near the bottom of the leaderboard in all pitching categories anyway. I guess they were 23rd in ERA when all was said and done. So, yeah, I mean, this is an already bad pitching staff that is losing 2 of its bigger name arms in Merrill Kelly and Zach Gallen. It's a pretty abysmal situation to be in. And yeah, the question is, can the Diamondbacks find a way to add enough on the pitching side under the budget constraints that they have without also, compromising what they have on the offensive side? And that brings us to a really big question, Jack, something that there's been a lot of buzz around here in the past few days. And it's, will the Diamondbacks trade Ketel Marte? We dedicated a whole show to this question a few weeks ago, but it's something we've gotten a lot more reporting about here in recent days. Mike Hazen himself addressed this at the GM meetings as well. This is also from our good friend Nick Picoro over at the Arizona Republic. On this topic, Hazen said this: "We field questions on all of our really good players. There's interest all the time, at the deadline, before the season, after the season. I have to do my job. I have to listen to what people have to say." Hazen added, "We'll see where the conversations go beyond that. I'd say it's mostly unlikely for that stuff, for that type of trade to happen." Um, and yeah, I know that Gambo came out recently and tweeted out about how the D-backs are not shopping Ketel Marte, but that they would listen on him. I don't really think that's a distinction that matters all that much. I mean, with someone like Ketel Marte, you don't have to go calling other teams to see if they want him. Like, he is a good enough player, and there's enough phone calls that are exchanged over the course of an offseason. You're going to get some calls about Ketel Marte no matter what you do. And it sounds like the Diamondbacks are more willing to listen now than they probably ever have been before. And of course, one of the big reasons for that, Jack, is that Ketel Marte is very close to reaching 10 years of Major League service. After that point, the D-backs would not be able to trade him, or at least he would have veto rights once he got there.
Right. The whole semantics around, motivated. Bob Nightingale reported that they were motivated to trade him.
Right.
And of course, the denials came out, and everybody who has access to Mike Hazen and the D-backs front office received those denials. No, we're just listening. And I'm going to ask everyone to put on their critical thinking hats. If the Diamondbacks, as Bob was told, let teams know that Marte is available, make an offer. Okay, that's what Bob was told.
Yeah.
They let teams know that he was available, make an offer. If that were true, would Mike say that publicly? Would he say that publicly to Gambo on air? Would he say that publicly at the GM meetings? Of course he would not.
No.
I mean, what do you expect him to do? To go out there and say, "Yeah, I'm shopping Ketel. We've got to improve this pitching staff. That's the guy that I've got to move. It's the only way I can get this done. Sorry, but this is no." Of course, he's not going to say that. Now, so all of the argument about was he listening, was he shopping, was he just, it doesn't mean anything. What we've said before, and I'll reiterate. I mean, if you go back and listen to those episodes, we have both said, I don't think he's going to get traded. But I don't think he's going to get traded because I think it's an extremely difficult task to find the right match.
Yeah.
Ironically, that whole Hunter Green proposal that we made, and I wrote about that too. Oh my God, that got, and then I mentioned that on Foul Territory. I mean, I got absolutely blasted to smithereens by fans of both teams.
Hey, that's
So I think I
that's
was
when
onto something.
that's when you got something that might be compelling, is when both fan bases are angry at you.
Yeah, I mean, both fan bases were like, because nobody wants to look at objectively at the risks of their own players.
Right.
That's the bottom line. And both players have risks. We don't have to dive into all of it right now. The point being that it is unlikely. I agree with Mike. It's unlikely that he's going to trade Ketel Marte because I think it's very unlikely that he can get a needle mover. I mean, how many guys out there that might be trade available that wouldn't bust his budget could he get? I mean, that's why we focused in on Hunter Green. He's an ace level starter when healthy, and he's reasonably priced. The Reds desperately need offense. So there was a potential match there, but maybe it's not a good enough match. And I would gather that what Mike is hearing from other teams about what they would be willing to give up for Ketel Marte is not going to be enough to entice Mike to make that kind of move. Just that simple. It doesn't make sense for him. Now, one last point I want to make here. Our good friend Jeff Irving, he and I had some great back and forth conversations on DMs, and we talked about the whole rearranging the deck chairs type of situation, and Nick alluded to that as well. Whereas if you move Ketel, he's projected for 4.5 WAR. If he's fully healthy, 100% and plays 150 games, he'll do more than that. But on paper, that's what you're talking about. Now, if you bring in a 4+ WAR pitcher like a Hunter Green, what have you accomplished? All you're doing is swapping WAR. But the argument I made there was there's two reasons why that could still be beneficial. Number one is if you're just repositioning some of that production into pitching, it kind of levels you out a little bit and might make you better able to win some of these close games and correct your atrocious one-run game record, with a pitching and defense model. So that's one. And then the second, and you've mentioned this, Jesse, it's easier to backfill. Okay, if Ketel's 4.5 WAR, I think it would be easier for the Diamondbacks to find a way to at least come up with 1.5 to 2 WAR at second base.
Yeah.
To replace Ketel than it will be for them to come up with 1.5 to 2 WAR pitching, where 1.5 to 2 WAR innings each pitcher is getting $16-18 million a year. So on the free agent market, so one is easier to backfill. Kind of if you think a little bit back to the Paul Goldschmidt trade, not relitigating that, when they traded him, it was just a 1-year deal, right? Because he only had 1 year of control left. And
Right.
so they picked up Carson Kelly and they picked up Luke Weaver. And for what they did in 2019, that production was almost equal. But they backfilled with Christian Walker at 2+ WAR at first base, which he wasn't going to reproduce Goldie's 5 and 6 WAR seasons. But it wasn't that difficult for them to backfill and at least plug 2 WAR right there while they improved in other areas. So that's kind of the concept here. Now, I hate to invoke that trade because that's not what we're looking for, what we're talking about. I maintain that if the Diamondbacks trade Ketel Marte, they must get a premium frontline pitcher back, or it makes no sense.
I would agree with that for sure. I do want to circle back to Hazen's wording. The phrase "mostly unlikely" to describe the chances that Ketel Marte is traded. I mean, that to me, like, if ever Mike Hazen were actually shopping a player, I almost feel like that's what he would like. That's the type of phrase he would use. I might be reading way too much into that, Jack. I probably am. But there's just something weird about the phrase mostly unlikely. He could have very well said that a trade is very unlikely. And that would have probably caused me to at least think a little bit differently. Be like, okay, if Mike Hazen says it's very unlikely, then okay, that probably means something. But mostly unlikely, it doesn't even really mean anything. I mean, it sort of just has like these qualifiers kind of built into it. So we'll see how things turn out over the course of the offseason. I very much agree with you that trading Ketel Marte is going to be very challenging. Feeling like you're actually moving the ball forward in that move is going to be tremendously difficult. And I'm with you. The default outcome is probably that trade just doesn't happen because the D-backs just can't find a fit that makes sense for them. But continuing on with some storylines from the past few days, we did get some news about some other D-backs that very well could be traded over the course of the offseason. We'll talk about that. We've got some other GM meetings news. We'll talk about Geraldo Perdomo a little bit later in the show, some MVP ballot information that we now have. We'll be right back after this break here on Snakes Territory.
This episode of FT is brought to you by Square. Your favorite neighborhood spots run on Square. Give me an example in Pennsylvania, Kratz.
Right down the street from my house, the Tap House. Not only is it an awesome place to hang out, get your beers, get your drinks, whatever it is, but you know what? The company has the simplicity of Square, and they give back to the community with 10% of all the proceeds that they bring in going back to community projects.
I love it. Sports and sports bars are so good at bringing together local communities, and you can actually take this ad as an excuse to go support your local spot and have yourself a day or a weekend in the neighborhood. Square is a proud partner of more than 4 million neighborhood businesses around the world. These businesses are what make the neighborhood the neighborhood. So visit square.com/go/foul to learn more. But before you do, go support your favorite neighborhood spot. You'll be happy you did. Square. See you in the neighborhood. Again, that's square.com/go/foul to learn more.
Well, I don't know if this is earth-shattering news necessarily, Jack, but we did also get a report from Nick Picoro during the GM meetings that one of Jake McCarthy and Alek Thomas appears likely to be traded this winter. We've talked for a long time about how having both of those guys on the same roster hasn't really made a ton of sense. And especially now with really neither McCarthy nor Thomas having provided much value at all in 2025, having both of them on the roster going into next year, it just seems like it might be time to commit to one of those guys instead of both. See if you can find playing time for that guy, but use the other one to try to get help in another area.
Yeah, my guess here is um, the best that they're going to do is get a reliever with a couple of years control that they like.
Yeah.
I mean, what else can you get? You're not going to get any starting pitching of any consequence for those guys. Um, nobody's giving up a top prospect for those guys. I'm just it is what it is. Their trade value is very low because of the season that they had. Between the two, I still maintain that the baseball community probably views Alek Thomas as having more upside than Jake McCarthy. And so at that point, you'd probably rather gamble on his upside. I don't know if that's actually true, but I think the gaps in each player's game are fairly evident. We watch them every day for the last 4 years, so we know them very well. And I'm sure teams scouting them do as well. But the bottom line is Alek Thomas does have some pop if he can get the ball in the air and he can get to it and improve his plate discipline. A lot of big ifs, but if he can, he's got more pop than Jake McCarthy, and so that'll always play as far as looking at potential trade value. So my guess is if they trade one, it'll be Alek because he has greater trade value, and they may actually be able to get something in return that will be useful to them on the major league roster in the form of a relief pitcher with 2 years of control or something like that.
It's an interesting comparison because they've actually played almost the exact same number of games in their major league careers. Jake McCarthy is at 431. Alek Thomas is at 420. Their plate appearance totals 1453 for Jake, 1385 for Alek. So they're in a really similar place in terms of how much we've seen of them at the big league level. I don't know. I mean, I think I definitely agreed with you. Maybe at like the beginning of last year still, where Alek Thomas, you'd seen what he could do defensively and offensively. There was no question that he had more power. That continues to be the case. But just looking bigger picture at this point, Jack, I mean, Alek Thomas has a career 76 OPS plus. Jake McCarthy has a career 96 OPS plus. And with Jake, I mean, if you're willing to buy in that like the truth for him lies somewhere between what he was this past year and what he was in 2024 when he hit 285 and had a 749 OPS, I mean, that's at least like a valuable player, right? I mean, he can play all three outfield positions. He can run the bases a little bit. He's going to be one of the fastest players on your team, and he's a close to league average bat. So I mean, it's maybe not a debate worth having. I wonder if Jake McCarthy maybe is caught up or might even have more trade value right now, but it's hard to say. Unfortunately for the D-backs, neither of these guys, as you said, is going to get them a whole lot in a trade right now.
Right. I mean, it is what it is. I hate to keep using that phrase, but I think that our listeners and D-backs fans have watched them. I mean, they're both great people. They both work hard. I couldn't want more success for either one of them. I mean, I love them both, I wish that the team was able to help them. I mean, maybe they're both change of scenery candidates. Maybe they go elsewhere and somebody can help them. That I guess we can't rule out the possibility that they both get moved.
Well, the D-backs are going to need somebody to play in the outfield in 2026, so they could move both. You're right; it's possible. They certainly would have some spots to fill if they did that. Transitioning over to another topic, Jack. One of the biggest variables for the D-backs going into 2026 is Corbin Burnes. And not just Burnes, I guess, but also AJ Puck and Justin Martinez, Lourdes Gurriel Jr., guys who are going to be coming back from pretty significant injuries at some point during the season. We don't know exactly when. But Burnes is interesting because he's a starting pitcher. I mean, he's exactly what the Diamondbacks need. And he showed in the first half this past year why the D-backs gave him the money that he did. Things were that they did. Things were a little rough for him early in the season, but he really, really settled into a nice rhythm before going down with the injury. I know you've done some research, Jack, into what we can expect from Burnes. I think a lot of people have a sense that, like, when a guy is coming back from Tommy John, you don't want to expect them to be their regular selves right away. But I know you have a little bit more research, some more specifics into what that usually looks like.
Yeah, I wrote an article. You can find it over on, Diamondbacks on SI. The title of the article is "Why Corbin Burnes' D-backs return may be disappointing," and it's only going to be disappointing to people that expect him to just step in and resume being, Corbin Burnes, where you're going to get 6 innings every night, and he's going to post a 3 ERA. The reality is this: even and I in my research, I kind of culled it down to elite or top end starting pitchers, guys that had won Cy Youngs, gotten Cy Young votes, made all-star teams, right? I didn't want to look at average pitchers. I wanted to look at guys that were really good, that went down with Tommy John surgery and returned like the year after, mid-year. Because there's a big difference between, say, a guy going down towards the end of the year, missing the entire next season, then having another full offseason and spring training to ramp up. Think Justin Verlander, right? And he came back and won the Cy Young. But
Right.
we're not talking about that. We're talking about guys that, they go down in February, March, April, May, and then they come back mid-season or a little later the next year. So somewhere in that 12 to 14 month range, sometimes a little longer. That's what I was looking at, because that's what Burnes is talking about. He's talking about coming back on September 29th. He was interviewed and said, my target is around the All-Star break. Okay, so everyone got all excited, like, oh, wow, Corbin Burnes is going to be back earlier. Mike Hazen, to his credit, has what I think is a very healthy attitude. He said, he views the returning arms coming back as more of a boost to the D-backs roster rather than being from the solution to a need to be filled at a later date. Alex D'Agostino wrote that, and here's the exact quote from Mike. We will be welcoming them back as we move through the season, the injured players. It will be a boon to what we're trying to do. So how do we get to that point is what I'm focused on right now. So look, they are talking about, it's like picking up players at the trade deadline. But
Right.
at the same time, like, who are you getting? So what I did, was I started looking at who are these players that in the last 5 years or so that were on a similar level, had Tommy John surgery, and what they do when they came back. So I broke it into 3 groups. The one was the moderately successful returns. And those included Chris Sale, Hyunjin Ryu, and Shane Bieber. So Chris Sale, he had his surgery in July of 2020. He came back in mid-August of 21. He made 9 starts and put up a 3.16 ERA, but he only threw 43 innings, so less than 5 innings per start. Ryu, similarly, went down, had his surgery in mid-June of 22, came back August 1 of 23. So again, it's just 13 and a half months. He made 11 starts and he had a 3.46 ERA, but he only threw 52 innings. Again, less than 5 innings per start. He also had kind of a nasty FIP at 4.91, and he went back to the KBO and pitched in Korea the last 2 years. And then you have Shane Bieber, who had his surgery in April of 24. Now he took a little bit longer. He came back in late August of 25. He made 7 regular season starts, and he averaged over 5 innings per start. He pitched 40 innings, went 3.5 ERA, and he pitched well in the postseason. So those are kind of nice, positive comps. Like, okay, that's something that you could maybe hold your hat onto. But then we look at like some of the poor regular season returns. Walker Buehler had his surgery in late August of 2022. And he came back in 24 in May. So he took a while to come back, but it was mid-season. And he made 16 starts and had posted a 5.38 ERA. Now, he did pitch pretty well in the NLCS and in the World Series and helped the Dodgers to World Series at that point. But I mean, he was pretty disastrous in the regular season, and he had a disastrous regular season this year. And then the other was Robbie Ray. Had his surgery May 3rd of 2023. He came back in July of 24. He made 7 starts. He barely crossed 4 innings per start. He threw 31 innings, and he posted a 4.7 ERA, and then he went down for the season with a hamstring injury. Now, in the case of Sale, backing up a little bit, I mean, he was really good the next year. Bieber was obviously good in the postseason. Buehler still not so much, but Robbie Ray had a solid season. So I'm not saying these guys are toast. I'm saying that when they first come back, it's a mixed bag. Then you have all the guys, and I'm sorry this is going on so long, but I've got a list of 6 guys that are kind of in that comparable range of what I call incomplete returns. Guys that came back and either pitched less than 10 innings or just 10, 12, 13 innings. Carlos Rodon, Luis Severino, Noah Syndergaard, Tyler Glasnow, Garrett Crochet, Jacob deGrom. So these are all guys that had surgery between 2019 and 2023. Almost, most of them had their surgery in the first half of the year, like Burnes, and most of them didn't come back until late in the year, in September. Whether that was their original timeline or if they had setbacks. But Rodon pitched 8 innings in his first return year, Severino 6, Syndergaard 2, Glasnow 7, Crochet 13, deGrom 11. Now, almost all of them in subsequent seasons had a lot of success. Rodon, Syndergaard, Glasnow, Crochet, deGrom all had success after the year after their first return year. Every athlete's different. Every arm surgery situation, they're all unique. I'm just trying to illustrate a wide range of outcomes and saying, hey, you might get 8 to 10, 12 really good starts out of Corbin Burnes, or you may get a half a dozen or a dozen pretty mediocre starts and a lot of, think about the Diamondbacks, pitch count control, keeping the innings down. They're not going to let him just go out there and all of a sudden rush out to 90, 100 pitches. No way the D-backs do that. So if anybody's thinking along the lines of, well, just get a decent starter and backfill, and then when Burnes come back, everything's going to be hunky-dory, I wouldn't count on that. Anything you get from him is a boost and a boon, but it's not something you can depend on. So a long way of saying all that.
No, yeah, I mean, that's really good stuff. I think it's important perspective for people to have. I mean, you think about getting a name like Corbin Burnes back mid-season. It's like, oh, well, maybe the D-backs could get by with just one starting pitcher. Maybe a Christian Mena or someone from AAA can fill in until Burnes gets back. But when you look at the numbers you just described, I mean, what really stands out to me is even the guys who performed well were not going deep into games. Chris Sale and Shane Bieber, I guess, is another example. We certainly saw him in the World Series have some success. It's not that you can't get anything from these guys. It's just that it's probably not going to look like it did before they went down with surgery. You're really looking at 2027, where you'd hope to see Corbin Burnes kind of look like himself again. I do want to circle back real quick, Jack, to the Ketel Marte conversation just for a second. Something that I don't think I realized initially in Nick Picoro's story over at the Arizona Republic. He said for the Diamondbacks to ultimately part with Marte, they likely would need to receive a package of young big leaguers or a combination of young major leaguers and prospects who are nearly big league ready. It's interesting to me that in both of those scenarios, it doesn't sound like a Hunter Green type trade or a Brian Wu or shooting for that frontline starter that you and I have really focused our attention around in these conversations. It sounds more like, I mean, the Zach Greinke trade didn't go well. I don't want to necessarily make a comparison to that, but more that format of trade where you're getting back multiple players. Granted, the Greinke trade, you were really getting prospects back. They weren't really big league ready guys. Corbin Burnes had a little bit of major league experience, but you weren't. Or Corbin. Did I say Corbin Burnes? Is that what I just said?
Yeah. Yeah.
Corbin Martin.
Corbin Martin.
Corbin Martin. The Diamondbacks, they have lots of Corbins. There are lots of Corbins to keep track of. Corbin Martin had a little bit of big league experience, but he was hurt. And so, I don't think there's any way the D-backs trade Ketel for a bunch of guys who are in Double-A, who really need more time to
Well,
get
that was a
ready.
salary dump.
Yeah, that's
the
true.
Greinke deal was a salary dump.
It was a different type of trade all the way around because of that. But just the larger picture of like, are you shooting for that one big name player, or maybe it's that player plus one other guy, or are you trying to spread the value around to receive a package of young big leaguers, which is the phrase that Nick used? Would that be of interest to you, Jack? Like, if it's a few young players who have potential, have some big time prospect status, maybe have played a little bit in the majors. Is that compelling? Or for you, does it have to be that frontline starter that could start for you on opening day?
It depends on what they're actually trying to accomplish. And what they're actually trying to accomplish may not always align with what they say publicly. Because you're talking about a rebuild. Retool, whatever.
Yeah.
You move Ketel Marte, who's an all-star caliber player, silver slugger at his position, easily one of the top 15, 20 hitters at worst in major leagues, right? And if you move that for a package of young players that might be good, that aren't proven, forget about fan reaction and, which they can't, but I mean, setting aside, I should say, not forgetting, but setting aside fan reaction, which would be enormously negative. You're just setting yourself up for a major disappointment because most of those guys aren't going to work out.
Yeah.
That's just the way that is. I mean, look, if you're moving Ketel Marte, you have to if they do anything but that, they're making a huge mistake.
Yeah.
Look, he's not going anywhere. He's going to have 10-5 rights in April. They're not going to be able to get the deal. And, Ketel Marte is probably going to finish out his contract at Diamondback.
Yeah, that does seem like the most likely outcome. I'm just so intrigued at what are those conversations looking like right now? I know there was a report that at least 7 teams have reached out to the Diamondbacks about Ketel Marte. Yeah, I mean, what
Look, we got
types
to
of
address the
names
elephant
could
in
be
the room.
coming back?
We got to address the elephant in the room. They're lowballing because everybody knows that the Diamondbacks were upset with Ketel because of what happened during the season. And the perception of Ketel, I mean, look, he just finished, 22nd, 23rd in the MVP voting. He got 1 9th place vote. Okay, now that's the media. That's not the other teams. But,
Yeah.
don't kid yourself. What happened damaged Marte's value in the marketplace. The way he's viewed, what teams are looking for, it severely damaged. And so, whether or not the D-backs are going to be able to get all they can and should get out of him going forward, that's up to them to figure it out. They made this bed, they got to sleep in it.
Yeah. Yeah, well said. The other little nugget that stands out to me from Nick and his final story from the GM meetings is that this is Nick reporting that Mike Hazen and others in his front office sound cautiously optimistic they might be able to match up with another club in a prospect for prospect deal that would bring back a young starting pitcher. So that, to me, Jack, sounds kind of like the Jazz Chisholm Zach Greinke or Zach Gallen. Boy, I'm getting all mixed up today with Diamondbacks of years past. The Jazz Chisholm Zach Gallen trade that happened back in 2019. You and I have tried to figure out like who is the Zach Gallen of today, like who is that guy who has just a little bit of big league experience, but that a team might still be willing to part with. I don't know who the name is, but it's interesting that Mike Hazen and others in his front office sound cautiously optimistic something like that could happen.
Well, Jesse, it's a great point. I think that if they're able to pull off a similar type trade, that would be great. I mean, again, going back to what I said at the top of the show, this is why they get paid the big bucks. Zach Gallen produced 19.4 WAR, Baseball Reference WAR, similar number by Fangraphs, for the Diamondbacks. So if they can do that again, if they can trade Jordan Lawler or Ryan Waldschmidt, somebody like that, and bring back a pitcher that produces that much for the franchise over a 5 or 6 year period, that would be wonderful. I'm not counting on it. I think that that's going to be very difficult to reproduce.
Yeah, that is probably fair. These deals basically never happen. So we'll see if the Diamondbacks are able to find a way to pull something like that off. To finish things up for this episode, Jack, we did want to revisit Geraldo Perdomo, his MVP chase, which frankly Geraldo Perdomo was never going to win the NL MVP, but he did have a legitimate case for second place, as we've talked about here on the show. Unfortunately, he did not get second place. He landed pretty much exactly where I thought he would, Jack, finishing fourth place behind Shohei Ohtani, Kyle Schwarber, and then Juan Soto. Perdomo slid in right behind those three guys.
Yeah, I mean, he did get 3 second place votes, and he was named on almost every ballot, at least at somewhere along the lines. I think the total number of votes he got was 10, 21, 26, 27, 28, 29. So, I think the only one that didn't include him, at least in the top 10, was the Colorado Rockies writer for MLB.com, Thomas Harding. The 2 Arizona BBWAA chapter voters in this case were Bob Nightingale and Barry Bloom, and they each gave him 5th place votes. But Perdomo did really well. I mean, 3 second place votes, 7 third place votes. That's 10 votes in the top 3 that he got. So he wasn't that far off. And I think that should he repeat this kind of season once again, I mean, then that would be phenomenal. Most likely is going to go down as far as WAR is concerned, his career year, but you never know with these things. But congratulations to Geraldo Perdomo, a truly fabulous season. The heart and soul of this team. I think that he was more valuable in many, many ways than Kyle Schwarber and Juan Soto. But I understand the voting for those players as well. And they each did some things that were fabulous this year too. So at the end of the day, Geraldo Perdomo's got a nice 4-year, $40 million contract or whatever it was, and he's going to be a well-paid but good bargain for the Diamondbacks player for at least another 4 years.
One of my big questions going into this, Jack, was would there be any voters that had Corbin Carroll higher than Geraldo Perdomo? And it did happen. There were 2 of them. Tim Kirkjian, the legendary Tim Kirkjian at ESPN, he had Corbin Carroll 7th on his ballot and Geraldo Perdomo 8th. And then it was also Mark Bowman from MLB.com. He had Corbin Carroll 8th and then Geraldo Perdomo 10th on his ballot. As you said, there was also a voter out in Colorado who did not have either. He didn't have Perdomo on his ballot. He also did not have Corbin Carroll on his ballot, but he did have Ketel Marte on his ballot. Go figure with that one. But no surprises here from me on this, Jack. I figured there'd be a couple of people who are just so much more familiar with Corbin Carroll's game. And, if you're a little bit more traditional, then maybe you're just looking at OPS. And Corbin Carroll did finish the year with an OPS a little bit higher than Perdomo.
Yeah, fair enough. Look, the recognition, the name recognition, and, I think sometimes there's carryover, whereas, Carroll's been great in the past. He had that great rookie year. This is the first time Perdomo has been great. So there's that. And again, it's notable that, the only vote that Ketel got was 1 9th place vote. Which, in strict value terms, I mean, there's no way that he was that low down. Whether or not he should have been top 10, is pretty debatable, but he easily could have been top 15. He should have got a few more votes than just one ninth place vote as far as his performance is concerned. Why nobody else pulled the lever for him, even at a 8th or 9th or 10th spot, other than Thomas Harding? Well, I think we've kind of already addressed that issue.
Yeah. I mean, it'll be fascinating to see moving forward. Like, does this become a regular thing for Geraldo Perdomo? Are we going to be talking about Geraldo Perdomo on MVP ballots on a year in, year out basis for the foreseeable future? Or was this truly just a breakout season, the likes of which we may never see before, we may never see again? It's not to say that Perdomo is never going to be a great player after this season. But the heights that he reached this year, Jack, I mean, even if he doesn't get to this point ever again in his big league career, which I think is possible, I mean, that he could still have an awesome career even if he doesn't have another season like he did this year. I mean, it was 7 wins above replacement. His defensive metrics at shortstop were great, and obviously the offensive numbers were there for him as well.
Yeah, I mean, in 2024, he had 3.5 WAR at Baseball Reference in 98 games, right? So, had he played 150, then that's a 5+ WAR season. So, I think the projections have him at 4 and change right now, which is about right. I mean, that's how projections work. And look, if Geraldo Perdomo is a 4 or 5 WAR player, legitimately already, he has been the last 2 years, right? Last year he was 5+. This year he was 7. So that's easily, even when you regress to the mean and take a little bump backwards, it's easy to project him to being a 4 or 5 WAR player, which is really good. I mean, that's borderline all-star right there. He's been an all-star once, ironically the year before that, when he probably didn't quite deserve it, but he deserved to be in the top 3 of the MVP this year. That's the season they were voting on this year. I think the voters missed, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him have a lesser season, but place higher in the voting if the D-backs make the postseason or something like that.
Yeah.
And he's the top position player. So, these things can work around pretty funny, but, bottom line, terrific player, terrific season, a joy to talk to, joy to be around, a joy to watch play baseball. He does everything pretty well. So just congrats again to Geraldo Perdomo.
Well, on that note, that is all that we have for this edition of Snakes Territory. We really appreciate all of you being here with us and being patient waiting for this next episode. As always, we'd really appreciate it if you'd subscribe to our channel here on YouTube. Hit the bell so that you receive notifications and never miss an episode of the show. Drop a like on this video. Leave us a comment. We would love to hear from you. If you're joining us over on an audio-only platform, it also would really mean a lot to us if you would leave us a 5-star review. You can find us over on social media as well. I am at Jesse N. Friedman on Twitter. Jack is at ShoeWizard59, and our show is at Snakes Territory. And of course, you can find all of Jack's written work over at Arizona Diamondbacks on SI. If you go over to his Twitter account, you could find all of his stories there, as well as a link just to the whole website where you can find his work as well as the work of Alex D'Agostino, his partner in crime over there, who also does an outstanding job. Jack, any final thoughts before we say goodbye?
I'm just really looking forward to the rest of the offseason. I mean, it's fascinating what's ahead, and how Mike Hazen is going to thread this needle and break out of his box. So, we'll be here to chronicle that.
There you go. Well, thank you again to all of you for being with us. We really appreciate it, and we'll be back with another episode of Snakes Territory very, very soon.